Hello, and welcome everybody joining us today for this event dedicated to ʻIeʻie, or ie'ie weaving and Hawaiian basketry. My name is Freya Crabtree. I'm the project curator for the exhibition Hawaii, A Kingdom Crossing Ocean, which opened at the British Museum in January and runs until the 20th of May. It was curated by the lead curator, Elise Christoph, and myself. And over the last couple of months, it has been amazing to witness so many people engaging with this exhibition, both in person and online through events like this. So thank you all for joining us. The exhibition, which was developed in close collaboration with artists, scholars, and cultural practitioners across the Hawaiian archipelago, celebrates the artistry and history of Hawaii. And throughout the exhibition, you'll see some incredible works made of basketry, especially ones made with the aerial root of the ie'ie vine, the majority of which are mahiole, or helmets. The exhibition also showcases some incredible contemporary works made by today's speakers. So I'm delighted to introduce to you our speakers today, Kumulāʻau and Haunani Sing, Native Hawaiian cultural practitioners and educators who specialize in ʻIeʻie basketry and who have been weaving for over 30 years. Over the last few years, I have had the joy of spending time with both of you in collections, looking through some of the mea kupuna or ancestral works here at the British Museum, as well as being able to witness your practice around ʻIeʻie in Hawaii. I'm so excited that you are here today to tell us more about your ie'ie and your ongoing practice and the cultural significance of Hawaiian basketry today, as well as your works in the exhibition. Please take it away.
Aloha. We'd like to start off the presentation first by doing a one of our traditional protocols, which is to do ʻEulue, which means to grow. In our cultural practice that we do, and we share this with all of our haumana, our students, that ie'ie is a climbing vine, so it continues to grow and always in the forest reaches to strive to climb to the tops of the to the trees. So therefore, we hope that this presentation will allow people to not just ourselves as people, but our viewers who are going to be watching this, that their knowledge of ʻIeʻie or Hawaiian twine basketry will help fulfill their interest. E ulu kini o ke akua ulu kane me kana lua ulu o hi'a lau koa me ka ie'ie a e mai a noho i kou kuahu Eia ka waila, he wai e ola no e.
Aloha. I'm Haunani, Balino-Sing.
And I'm Kumulāʻau Sing, and we are Native Hawaiian weavers from the island of Oahu in the state of Hawaii. And we're also cultural bearers. We've taken on the kuleana, or the responsibility of reintroducing this cultural practice to many of our Native Hawaiian communities throughout the Hawaiian Islands. So today we're going to be sharing about ʻIeʻie weaving because some of the artifact kupuna pieces that are being on exhibit now at the Hawaii Kingdoms Crossing Ocean exhibition in the British Museum in London features ʻIeʻie works from our kupuna, our ancestors. And part of being culture bearers is educating the public. What you were looking at that previous slide was Haunani and I in 2024 and 2025 teaching the community who came to Capitol Modern, which is the Hawaii State Art Museum, featuring our exhibition of ʻIeʻie, or woven things, called Nākua Kea, the vast and numerous deities, in Honolulu. So part of our kuleana, as not just teaching in the public, is also educating the community about this least practiced woven form in Hawaii.
Yeah, least practice. Like Kumulāʻau said, we took on the responsibility of teaching this particular work because not too much people are doing it here in Hawaii. There's just a handful. So we took on the responsibility to teach this work in our community. to non-Hawaiians as well as our Hawaiian people. And then we decided that, doing a weekend workshop wasn't enough because people were hungry to learn more about the culture. So we started to do year-long cohorts, maybe 12, 14 months, where they'll start with basic basketry, start to learn how to do fish traps, three types of fish traps that we'll show with you later in the film. And then eventually they will create an image like you see in the backgrounds, that's erected on the poles that are similar to our traditional, but they're actually made for our Kanaka today, or our people of Hawaii today. So we have a lot of practitioners, a lot of educators that are creating these images that will resonate with what their work is that they do here today.
So what is ʻIeʻie? ʻIeʻie is a climbing screw pine. It's part of that ohana, that family. It's also known as a scientific name, Freycinetia arborea. It's an endemic plant in Hawaii, but there are many different species throughout the Pacific that are very similar in appearance and in growth. So our ie'ie, which is found in Hawaii, can also be found in the Marquesas and in some parts of French Polynesia in Tahiti. But also in Tahiti, there's another species of Freycinetia, Freycinetia demisa. And then, of course, there's different species in Aotearoa, which is New Zealand, in Samoa, in Australia, in Fiji, and even other places. ʻIeʻie has various components or parts of the plant, which is used for different purposes. So the flower or the pua, young ones was said to have been eaten by people. Of course, the seed pods that we see here in the center, these clusters, are the pods that would be provided food for our native birds, our honey creeper birds, who were the ones that were in charge of proliferating and pollinating the plant and spreading it throughout our forest. In our culture, as in many cultures around the world, there's always a male and female variety. So what we're looking here on the left side is the female plant, the female variety of ʻIeʻie, as well as the male variety on the right. These are some of the birds that to just traditionally and even in present day are the pollinators of ʻIeʻie in our forest. So traditionally it was done by the o'u bird, which is that green yellow bird that we see there in the top left. Of all the bird pictures, it's on the top left. That bird is now believed to be extinct. On the right, we have the alala, or the Hawaiian crow, which is endangered today. It's making a revival in our forest today with the help of many bird conservationists, raising the alala in captivity and releasing into the wild. And then, of course, we have our endangered ʻiʻie and apapane birds that are still present in our forest today that are still carrying on with the pollinating of ʻIeʻie.
So this is the aerial root that comes down from the main
The vine.
vine, the vine that is extended from the main core or the branch of the ie'ie. So this is a part of the plant that we do use. As you can see in the middle with us holding it with our hand, you can see there's various nodes that's on the plant, on the aerial root. So when we go in and we go into the forest and we do collect them, we want to collect them that's a little longer. We say ha'ilima, which is from your fingertip to your elbow, but it would be about maybe a feet or two. If they're not that long, we'll leave them and let them grow till they can grow longer. The problem that we're having now in Hawaii is that they're very scarce, and with a lot of development that's going on in the islands throughout our island chain, they're going up into the forest and developing. So we're having, they're very scarce for us as practitioners to be using, but we're also dealing with another type of disease that's happening in our forest as well.
So what's happening in our Native Hawaiian forests, and ʻIeʻie is a tree climber, as we shared earlier, that ʻIeʻie would climb on trees like the koa tree and the ʻIeʻie lehua tree. But roughly about 12 years ago, it was a fungus was detected among our ʻIeʻie trees. And it's called rapid ʻIeʻie death. It's a fungus that bores itself into the core of the tree, thus preventing water from reaching all parts of the tree to allow it to continue to grow healthy. So as a result, on the inside of the tree, this fungus kills the inside of the ʻIeʻie trees, and the fungus spreads. Now, part of our responsibility or kuleana we do with our students is when we take them into the forest, there are protocols that we observe, and one of them would be to treat our shoes with, spray them with alcohol to prevent the transmission of this fungus. It's one thing to go into a forest and then, to carry that fungus on our shoes and then take it to other parts of the forest that might be healthier or unaffected by rod, or even transmit it in some other location after that day of visit. As we also do an oli kahea, like how we started this morning with an oli aloha or eulu, a chant to just greet everybody and also for growth. So we do oli kahea. We ask permission to go into the forest. We ask the ancestors of the forest and the akua, the gods of the forest, for permission to go in there, for safe passage, for the time that we're in that space, for safety, so no one gets hurt. And as Haunani had shared, when we harvest ʻIeʻie, so in the picture on the right there, it shows Haunani collecting some ma'awe, or the rootlets. And if it's shorter than 2 feet, we basically leave it because we want the rootlets to continue to grow. So that's what it means by appropriate length. Anything longer, 3 feet or longer, we like to take that. And aloha aina also, at the end of our activity, when time permits, we like to leave the forest a better space than when we found it. So that might involve removing invasives, clearing areas, helping and assisting the ʻIeʻie to not only just sprawl on the ground, but try to help it find its way back to a tree, especially for those branches or vines that are not on a tree. We try to help find its way or redirect it back to a tree. And these are pictures of us gathering ʻIeʻie, 3 different occasions actually. And actually the one on the right is cleaned ʻIeʻie, so there was no gathering there. But the one on the left was from Waolani. That was in my very early years of gathering, when I would just brave the forest myself. But nowadays we don't encourage our students to just go by yourself. We believe that you should always go with a partner into the forest in case anything happens to you.
And there is a mindset that we do with the students is, you go there, you want to enjoy what we have there, the ecosystem. So the birds, the insects, that whole ecosystem is all a part of this. And when you find ʻIeʻie, that's a good sign that your forest is healthy. So it is really important that we help to malama aina or aloha aina, like Kumulāʻau has shared earlier, that we want to help the plants thrive. And so if in taking out invasives will help that, then we'll do that to help.
In this picture here, you can see that among the trees that do have ʻIeʻie, and this picture is taken from the island of Oahu. So we are in a forest that doesn't have native trees. So in this case, the big trees that we see here are Eucalyptus robusta. And so these are, again, invasive or introduced trees. They're not native. But for this part of the forest, for every one tree that might have the ʻIeʻie plant growing on it, there are like 4 or 5 different trees that are covered with this climbing monstera vine. And they're competing with the ʻIeʻie for sunlight, for water. And so, our ʻIeʻie forest is slowly disappearing and being overcrowded by this invasive climbing monstera. This picture here is on the island of Hawaii in Kealakekua, Mauka. And we have students there. We have a class there now going on that we started 2 months ago and will graduate in April of 2027. But when we can partner with community partners like Hikiola, we're able to uh, provide these cultural opportunities for our students, native and non-native alike, to be in that environment, to appreciate the natural space where ʻIeʻie will thrive, especially on Hawaii Island. So here we have some of our students making the hinalea or the funnel trap.
This is a class that we had in Kona, another year-long cohort. So we don't normally take them into the mountains until they're 6, 7 months, only because of the scarcity. So we have a substitute. We use rattan, prepared rattan, processed rattan that is already coiled, ready, already cut to the measurements that we want for them to practice with. So for the first 6 months, they're just practicing on rattan, and then eventually we'll take them into the mountains and show them where the ʻIeʻie and its environment is, and then we'll show them how to harvest as well as process, and then they'll be able to make a little project with the ʻIeʻie to see the difference of the rattan and the ʻIeʻie.
Part of that process of practicing for the first 6 months is making baskets, open eye or fish baskets and fish traps and the peahi or the fan. So that ways, when they actually are ready to use ʻIeʻie, they have some kind of foundation that can help them to weave the ʻIeʻie properly without wasting. So once we gather the ʻIeʻie, of course, you look at these lengths, they're 5 feet and longer, which is really nice. We have to dry the ʻIeʻie. So part of it before the drying process is, of course, is cleaning it. When I mean by cleaning it, we're not cleaning off the bark yet, but we're cutting them to size. We're sorting them by the thickness, the lengths, and then we tie them into tight bundles, getting ready to store them in a cool, shady place. Until the bottom picture there, until the ʻIeʻie is nice and dry, it shows signs of flaking where the outer bark is flaking from the rootlets. And when we gather long, extremely long ʻIeʻie, it's easier to coil them when transporting them out of the forest. And then, of course, because we coil them, when we have a chance, we want to allow them to straighten out by allowing it to rest so that the rootlets can kind of straighten themselves out and get them ready for weaving.
So this is part of the process. So after the bark has dried out, it'll be about 1 or 2 months. We let them dry out in an outside area, cool area, dark. Doesn't have we don't want to put them in direct sunlight. The outer bark gets flaky and flakes off. Then we know that's a good sign that we're ready to take it to the ocean. We put it in the water, and the salt water will help us to scrape off. If you can see on the far left in that picture with the shell and that organic piece, that's the slimy portion that we need to scrape off of the ʻIeʻie. And then once that slimy portion is taken off, then it'll be ready to process splice. But as you can see, the nodes in the center picture, as we're scraping with either a butter knife or a opihi shell, you wanna clear out those nodes so that when you're finally ready to weave, you're not gonna have these nodes sticking out. So if you look on the far right side, you can see us scraping off the nodes with the shell.
Once the rootlets are cleaned, then what we do is called ho'okui, where we splice the rootlets. Sometimes we'll use the entire round rootlet, or when we want, and they will be used for the warps or the spokes of a project that we would be creating. And when we splice them, we create weavers or a kuana. And then that's the one that you see on the exterior of a basket or the trap. So the weavers. So the weavers are normally half round, and the spokes themselves can be either splints where you have two side flat, and then or in this case you might use round one depending on the piece that we're creating.
Yeah, so every start we call it a piko. That's the start of any basket or anything that we do. Actually, we always have a piko to start our event or anything. That is really the start of whatever it is that you're doing, which is the most important part of the framework, because if you don't start with a strong piko, you're not going to have a strong basket. So it is very important for us to be sure that the students, when they're learning how to do this work, that the piko is solid, and then they're ready to move on.
And there are many different kinds of ways of starting Pico. If you look at this Pico here, each of the spokes has approximately three avilolo or warps or spokes in them. And the weavers, there are three weavers going on in this Pico, so it creates a three-ply or what we call ka'akolu. And then, as Haunani has shared, these are three different examples of fish traps, or hina'i ho'olu'ulu'u, sometimes called that. Any trap that's submerged underwater, whether it's in the stream or in the ocean.
And as you can see, we don't have a studio. This is our studio, our home. So if we're in the yard or we're down the beach, or that's where we work. And we're very organic, we don't really need a special place to do this work. It's really wherever we are. And we translate that with our students as well. It's important to just do it where in a space that you're comfortable, that you can create these beautiful pieces.
And these three traps are three different shapes. They're intended for catching three different kinds of fish. The one on the left is an oopu trap or a goby fish. The one on the middle there it's actually hanging upside down, but that's a hinalea or wrasse fish trap. And the one that looks like a funnel, that one on the right, that's a shrimp trap or hina'i opai. So, doing this practice allows us to, for one, because we are Native Hawaiian, this is an opportunity for us to express ourselves as Native Hawaiian. When we talk about culture, culture cannot be something that's it cannot exist in a vacuum. It's something that constantly evolving, it's growing, changing. Otherwise, our culture would be an artifact in itself, meaning that you'd have to go somewhere and learn about our culture as Hawaiian, such as a museum. However, like all things, our culture is a living culture, so it's evolving to reflect the values and the emotions, the feelings, the worldview of our people today. And so therefore, we have that, we have, free licensing, if you will, or the latitude to experiment with our ʻIeʻie weaving. Not only do we recreate traditional pieces that our ancestors have done for millennia, but also to create things that are a reflection of us as Hawaiians today. So a good example in this picture with Haunani here is a wall hanging of Kalama'inu'u, who was a mo'o or a lizard goddess who had the ability to shapeshift and change herself into a beautiful woman when she wanted to. Our kupuna never made wall hangings of their akua, of their gods. They created images, but this is an example of taking the idea of making images, making them contemporary and expressing them in a different way so that it can be exhibited like this, in this case, as a wall hanging.
Yeah, and then on the right side, you see various picos, and these are all practice picos. We were blessed to be able to replicate some of our kupuna or our artifacts that's in the British Museum. So these are just pictures of us just trying to figure out what how the pico starts. And even though we have some books that we can go to for reference, there really isn't much information on ʻIeʻie. So when we took on this responsibility, we also took on the responsibility to create some sort of foundation. So that's what we're doing now, is really adding meat to the bones when we do this practice.
And it wasn't until an opportunity with the support of the Mark and Lynn Benioff Oceania program, we came in 2022 with 5 other cultural practitioners from Hawaii to be able to look at collections. And in this case here, the primary focus of our visit was really to assist with the akua hulu manu, or the feather gods that we see there in the collections. So, and then of course, while we were there, we had the opportunity to examine mahiole helmets, hina'i, which are baskets. And so, it was a very wonderful experience because for us as practitioners and culture bearers, the more knowledge we get, the more we can share with our people, our students at home. And we're firm believers of makahana ka'ike. So in doing, that is how we learn. And so here we were examining one of the mahioles. Of course, that's Froya over there with us. And
Working with Freya, yes.
what was really nice was the opportunity to really to handle them, to look at them, to examine them very up close. And by doing so, we also learned from this one particular piece that mahioles sometimes were not perfectly sized for an individual, or sometimes they were repurposed to pass on to another chief. And sometimes when they had to make adjustments, they would alter or cut the mahiole and refit it for a new chief. It just shows that how ingenious our kupuna were in making and adapting the headwear for our people at that time.
Mhm. This is a picture. So fortunately, after we went to the British Museum, Froya and Elise came over to Hawaii. So we took them into the forest to go and see where the ʻIeʻie grows, harvest some with them. So this is one of the spaces that we go and harvest ʻIeʻie. So we're very grateful that we could bring them along with us and share our experience with them. It's one thing to go into the space, but you understand once you've gone to where the plant grows, learn about the area, and then bring the plant and start to process. It is very important for our students to learn all of those steps. It brings up a greater appreciation of what they do when they do this work.
And again, we were there to examine the akua hulu manu. So the two outer pictures, the left and outside right, those two key or akua hulu manu feather gods are in the British Museum collection. So part of our experience there returning also informed us in how we want to instruct our students in recreating these akua or gods. Traditionally, like the slide before, traditionally the akua that were created was images of Ku, the god of war, the god of politics, and the aliʻi. But and when we did our very first class on the island of Maui here, we had 11 images created. 9 of them were Ku images, and the other 2 were Lono. So again, the idea of although we are recreating and continuing the practice of our kupuna, these images that we create today serve a different function, different purpose, how they're used, if they're worshipped or not worshipped, or if they're fed. We have a different protocol in how we use our ʻIeʻies today. And when people see these ʻIeʻies, some of them think that they're masks, and they're not really masks. They are actually religious images that every ruling chief would have one that was taken care of by a kahuna or their spiritual advisor.
So this is our first year-long cohort that we started in 2017.
Yeah.
2017, and this is their graduation on Maui.
When we came back from London in September of 2022, September 2022, our second cohort, which was in Hilo, wanted to replicate or go bigger on their ʻIeʻies. So we actually did go bigger on the creation of the ʻIeʻies. And one of them, the second to the left there, kind of resembles one of the images in the British Museum collection. So that name of that ʻIeʻie in this picture here is Elua, which means number 2.
So shortly after we finished the Hilo cohort and had graduated them, the following month we started 2 new cohorts, one on Oahu as well as one on Hawaii Island in Kona. So this is the Oahu graduation students. We held this classes and graduation at Bishop Museum in Honolulu. As you can see, one of the students had created her image or her ʻIeʻie and had feathered. Now, to feather it is another thing. I mean, once you finish the framework, weave the framework, then the next step would be to sew on what do you call it, a nai or a netting. And then once you secure the nai or the netting, then you would have these bundles of feathers. So what we do with the feathers is you're cutting it like maybe 1.5 inches, and you're putting three together, and you're bundling them up, and then you add them onto the nai or the netting. So it is a long process, but she did it within that 14 months that we had.
And you can see, these aren't just cool images anymore. If
Yeah.
we backtrack to the previous slide, when we came back from London, we also see the addition of a very large ki'i on the far right side, the black one, which was modeled after the hula ki'i, which is only 15 inches made of wood in the British Museum. And then, of course, we have a demigod images in this case. We have Kamapua'a. We have a ka'ai that Haunani is carrying. A ka'ai was like a funerary casket for our chiefly the ʻIeʻie or their bones.
Yeah, so we're also creating pieces to address the things that we have right now, issues that we have right now. So like I had mentioned about there's a lot of desecration with our ʻIeʻie kupuna, or the bones of our ancestors. And then, once we gather them, there is a process. We normally wrap them with kapa, or this bark cloth, and then we would insert them into a hinaʻi, or a basket of lauhala, which is another type of material. Or I created a ka'ai to show that we could make a basket out of ie'ie for your loved ones.
And so, this was the other cohort that was in Kona of that same year, 2023-24. And now we have shapeshifter images, we have ancestral images, we have not only ku images, we have lono images. Lono, of course, was the god of agriculture, fertility, and peace. We have some Kanaloa images, god of the ocean, and some Kane images, god of mankind, sunlight, fresh water. And so again, our students have the knowledge and the know-how to ulana, to weave at this point, and by them creating the images that represent themselves, express themselves as Hawaiians, we're okay with that. Although they're not traditional, it's rooted in the traditional concept of how they were created. So these would be contemporary or neo-traditional images. So that ways, our students will take good care of their ki'is because it's something that they created.
They resonate with.
And they put their mana into it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, this was our last class that we just graduated in December of 2025. This was again at the Bishop Museum in Honolulu, Oahu. Again, we have more different kinds of images being created. Again, they're very large. So some people might view this as contemporary Hawaiian art. But yet this is not just art. These images that our students create are living entities. We go through full ceremony with them. We dedicate them. We feed them. We give them names. And again, our students are the stewards who take care of their images that they create, and we use them in ceremony. So using the ki'is in ceremony, other than just, it's not a dust collector, it's not a conversation piece on the coffee table or a shelf, but these images actually participate in ritual ceremony for the community. So these images here was taken from the opening of our Capital Modern Keaulama exhibition during the Festival of Pacific Arts and Culture in the summer of 2024. Sometimes the images are asked to participate in other community events. So last fall at Iolani Palace, we had a celebration of the Kumulipo, which was our creation chant, in which 6 different chanting teachers and their students recited the chant of creation from the Kumulipo, and our ki'is were asked to lead the procession to bring all of that mana into that space here at Iolani Palace. So it started in the late afternoon, evening, and into the night.
Yeah, so when they're reciting, that's like 4,000 lines that they're reciting for the Kumulipo. So can you imagine the time?
Yeah, that this is another event, and so this is an event that's gonna this was last year's event. This was the Kipai Pai, or the Hula Kuahu, or the altar ceremony that kicks off Merry Monarch. It usually takes place on Easter Sunday, where the ki'is will lead the procession of hula practitioners to start Merry Monarch. One of the projects that we worked on, we were tasked to do several, replicate some of the pieces in the British Museum collection. One of them was mahiole, or the helmet, or known also as the feather helmet. So, the picture on the left was illustrated by John Weber, who was Captain Cook's one of his illustrators in 1778, of a Hawaiian chief wearing his regalia and his mahiole. The picture on the right is our son Makana, who's wearing a feathered mahiole and feathered kipuka, feathered cape, in the opening ceremony for Festpac at Capitol Modern. And the picture in the middle just shows what the mahiole looks like unfeathered when it's woven. And when we think about the things that we do today, mahiole cannot just be reserved for film, for documentaries, and for pageantry in parades. And yes, these are good things because one, it lifts, it shares our cultural identity as Kanaka in the rest of the world with the rest of the world. But again, it cannot just be reserved to things of the past. Like, oh yeah, this is how our chiefs used to wear the helmet, is how they used it. So what we need to do, or what we've been doing with our work, is finding new ways to give new life and purpose to the mahiole without denigrating its capacity just for things of the past. So we found that the mahiole, if we think about it, it's a symbol of our chiefs, of our leaders, and only people worthy of wearing them would use them. So we found ways to honor people who are leaders in our community, who are standing up for social justice issues for our people. In this case, the recent conflict on Mauna Kea on Hawaii Island for the telescope, the construction of a 30-meter telescope, we had Kaho'okahi Kanuha, who's a very eloquent Hawaiian speaker, native speaker. He speaks really well. He spoke to the politicians and the police and the people and helped organize the peaceful protests on the mountain. So therefore, we wanted to award him and honor him as a leader. So he is wearing the mahiole in a contemporary context. Again, it's to show who our leaders are. So again, we were tasked to replicate some of the pieces. So I did the mahiole, and a couple mahiole actually I did, and Haunani also did a papale.
So this is on the right, or on the left is the kupuna, or the artifact papale, and the one on the right is the one that I had created, and it's actually my second attempt. The first time, we saw it in person when we went to the museum, and then we took a lot of pictures. So I went with the pictures to recreate them, and when I finished the first one, I wasn't happy with it, but it was a good learning curve, to really inspect the artifacts and to mimic what our kupuna did, or our ancestors did. It was a task, but there's a lot of knowledge that comes in as you're starting to redo these, and that's where the learning and the connection of our kupuna really starts, is how getting into seeing things in their lens, how they saw things, and why they made problem solving, and how they created all of these pieces. So on the left is the first piece that I made, which you can see is a little wide on the top, and then on the right I scaled it down. So apparently the kupuna piece, or the artifact, was made out of ie'ie, that's like maybe a 1 millimeter or maybe a millimeter and a half
Yeah, a couple millimeters.
wide. And so I used 2 millimeter, and I wove it with rattan. But even looking at it after I'm done, and we went back to the British Museum to see it in the exhibition, yes, there's no comparison. It still needs to be smaller. So I will attempt to gather more and do a smaller weave with a smaller millimeter to make another papale. But you can see the first one is not as clean as the second one. But that was all part of the learning process, the learning curve.
Of course, the mahiole. So there's the mahiole hawaka, or a spoked helmet. The one on the right is the one in the collections. The one on the left was my attempt at recreating that particular piece with ie'ie. And again, like Haunani shared, we're working with rattan. Well, in that last slide was ie'ie, but in this picture here, where this mahiole on the left is trying to mimic the mahiole on the right, but in reverse, meaning that we turn the colors around. So what was black on the mahiole on the right would be like brown or natural, and whatever was natural would be brown, et cetera, et cetera. So we tried to, as if we were to invert the colors. But again, we're using a material that is thicker. So this is like this is still 2 millimeter, but it's not as fine as the ie'ie rootlets that our kupuna used in the mahiole making on the right there. So the only way to really truly achieve something like our kupuna did on the right would be to really use ie'ie, a lot of it, and very fine, so that we could actually make it as fine as the one on the right there. But as we have shared, when we are doing things like this, oftentimes we're using rattan as an alternative material, because to create a mahiole like that fine mahiole on the right there would really exhaust a lot of ie'ie to do so. This was actually the opening evening of Capital Modern, our exhibition, Na'akua Kea, the Vast and Numerous Deities. And the reason why we chose that name is because many of the ki'is that our students make cover a wide spectrum of akua, or gods and goddesses. And like I said, traditionally there was only war gods, or the feather war god of Ku, that our kupuna made. And originally there were, as far as we know, there were 19 existing akua hulu manu in museums and institutions around the world. Today, there are only 17 that we know of, because 2 has since been repatriated back to Hawaii. So now there are 17 akua hulu manu out there in the global community that people might have access to see and visit. We're kind of like getting to the end of our slideshow, so at this time we want to leave it open for any kind of questions that we may be able to answer. So please feel free.
Wow, thank you both. That was amazing. So many interesting things to cover. One of the things I was wondering about when you were talking was about the dyeing, or the colors that are in the pieces that are not feathered. So I can remember when we were in collections looking at the papale and also that mahiole that are they seem to have 3 different colors in them, dyed into them. And I know you guys sometimes dye the rattan as well. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, traditionally for especially for our woven artifact pieces, our kupuna pieces, they would use natural, of course, as one color. To create a nice brown, they would create hili kukui, or using they would be basically boiling the bark of the candle nut tree or the kukui nut tree, and that would create a nice rusty brown color that could be used for dyeing the rootlets. And there's different shades of brown. Again, the longer you apply, you dye and you dry, you dye again. It allows the rootlets to absorb the color. So the more absorption of the color, the darker the rootlet gets. Now, to create black, what they would do first is they would get the natural rootlets, and they would, first of all, they would actually go ahead and take the rootlets and bury it in a muddy, dark mud taro patch. The taro patch would allow the colors from the dark mud would change the color of the rootlet and make it a darker color. And then when they would add it with, then they would actually use, to create the black, they could use the soot. They would burn the kukui nuts and collect the soot. And the soot, which is black, they would rub it on top of the rootlet. And they would also create hili kukui and dye it in hili kukui. And there, as a result of that, there's a chemical reaction that causes the rootlets to turn black. Now, unfortunately, traditional Hawaiian colors are not very vibrant dark colors. So they're kind of more on the pastel-like. So when we say black, it would kind of look like charcoal black, but not a very dark black. And so, but that's how traditionally the colors would have been done. When in the case of where there is a piece with woven colors, they would do all of that first, dye all the different colors first, and then weave them into the piece, so that you have the 3 different kind of colors that you would see like in the artifact piece.
Yeah, but we live in a different time, so we use sometimes we need to use the synthetic dyes to just overnight weave it, and dye it overnight, and then we're weaving it the next day. So if we don't have time to dye, with our traditional ways, then we definitely will use synthetic if we need to, especially if we're teaching and we need to pump out a bunch of different colors for whatever the course is that we're doing. So, I mean, we're always going back and forth. We're going back to our old ways, but we're also doing things that are available and ready for us to use for today as we evolve.
And like the title slide had that rainbow basket.
Yeah.
And that's why we kind of wanted it to be a talking point. And when we say it's traditional Hawaiian basketry, yet it was kind of like a ironic or oxymoron that we would use a very colorful basket. But again, if our ancestors had the colors that we have today, they would be definitely using them and making a wide variety of different contemporary colored baskets today. So yeah, we use the rattan or we use the contemporary synthetic dyes when we're doing work today.
Yeah.
But I remember like some of the hinahi in the baskets in the collection here that they're quite faded now, but when you look really close, you can see that they would have had like really vibrant possibly, but definitely very sort of intricate patterns. So like you're saying, of course people would, they could make all these incredible patterns. They would and these bright colors, they would love to do that, I'm sure. I'm really interested in the like absolute variation and diversity you see in different piko and different ways of starting and different ways of making mahiole. I'm thinking about like when we were in collections again, looking at pieces and how you see the same technique appear, but also sometimes completely different ways of doing the same thing. I'm thinking especially of that one mahiole that is made is woven like a basket from a single point, reading out where most of them seem to start at a different point. Do you think that this sort of is just like different makers' approaches, that there's just there's hundreds of different ways to make things? Do you think there's one way that is just when you're making things, do you stick to one way usually, or what's your approach?
We have a wise saying, "Awe pau ka ike ka halau ho'okahi," meaning that not all knowledge is taught in one school, and so therefore we had a variety of many different makers throughout the Hawaiian Islands. It's very possible that some of the mahiole that were collected at the same time could have been made by the same hands, perhaps. But just looking at the different varieties of the picos and how those mahioles, especially the ones in your collection, was started, whether it was a circle pico, oval pico, or what I would like to call the fishbone, where the weavers are running from front to back, or the pie-shaped one, which is running from left to right, front to back. We teach our students that there are 4 different ways of starting the cap, or the cap portion of the mahiole. So those all have 4 different starts. And like I said, it really depends on the weaver. We've taught all 4 styles to our students who are making mahiole today. But ultimately, we tell them, just like myself, you might want to just reserve yourself to 2 different styles, the 2 best ones that you like to do all the time, your go-to start of caps. But we know that our kupuna made 4 different types of starting points to create the mahiole. And, it's just amazing how they did that. And wouldn't have not known that if we didn't get a chance to look into the mahiole.
Yes.
And the thing I think most people don't understand, unless you actually get a chance and opportunity to look inside the mahiole, especially if it's covered with hulu and featherwork, you don't know how they started it until you look at the underside inside the helmet to see how they started it. So that's really amazing.
Yeah. And for the ones, the pieces that have the really strong pattern on them, do we think that they were never intended to have hulu or feathers, or do we not?
That
Why
is
make them so?
That is the impression that, if it was beautifully feathered, like John Dominus Holt once said that, beautifully woven helmets with designs were meant to probably not be feathered because then you would hide the work. With our students, that's why we were very critical about when our students make the mahiole, especially if they're not going to be feathered, that, we have to try to strive to make it as beautiful and as mael or clean as our ancestors did, because people will be looking at it without featherwork. Now, if it was to be covered with netting and sometimes with sugarcane grass to kind of cover in some missing gaps or holes in the helmet itself, and then cover with netting and featherwork, then we wouldn't have to be so critical of our weaving today because it would have been hidden under the layers of the netting, grass, and the hulu. But in our case, many of our students won't do the feathering, so therefore we try to teach them to weave it nice and tight and neat as possible.
And then I wanted to ask as well about the peahi, the hat, the wonderful hat that you made, and you said that you made it with rattan that was 2 mil wide, but that it's still not as. And I can remember trying to measure the ie'ie on it, and it's so small. Is there a difference when weaving with rattan? Like, can you not get it small enough, or is it like does the does ie'ie behave differently when weaving? I suppose I'm asking.
Yes, I think so. Because one thing we learned about weaving with ie'ie, it's more elastic. It has the ability to stretch, so you can put more tension on it and pulling on it, versus the rattan, which is kind of like stuck in its size, and it doesn't have the elasticity and the flexibility to versus like the ie'ie, where you can stretch it just a little bit more to kind of and weave it much more tighter than you can with the rattan. It's just a different material. So that's one thing beautiful about ie'ie, that it has that elasticity to pull it tighter, and to even weave it smaller, because you can splice the rootlet into a smaller koana or weaver to put into your piece.
Yeah, so when weaving the mahiole, the papale or the hat, because it is smaller in millimeters, it just takes a little bit longer to weave it, but it's a really fine weave, which makes it so beautiful. It's very intricate, and that's what makes it so beautiful that our kupuna even thought to go in that small and weave something like that. Um, it's just mind blowing. Just
Yeah,
to
it must have taken the materials it must have taken and the time it must have taken to weave it so tight with that pattern as well. Incredible.
Yeah.
So one thing we noticed too about when we work with the ie'ie, you have to soak it so it becomes pliable, but when it dries, it becomes very woody like again. It becomes much more firmer, so it has a stronger support than it would, if we were working with rattan.
Be curious to know how you got started weaving and doing this practice and teaching.
Well, started weaving in 1997 and started teaching I guess publicly like in 2001. Because we didn't talk about like, traditionally this was obviously all families did this kind of weaving. I mean, because this was utilitarian things. But when we talk about connection to ancestry, like how some practices today have genealogies to them, like, oh, I learned from so and so, who learned from so and so. But traditionally it wasn't like that. It was just everybody did it. But today, when you talk about cultural practices in the contemporary, people learn from somebody. I mean, yes, I also started learning from before I had a teacher, started to learn from Arts and Crafts of Hawaii by Tenangi Hiro's or Peter Buck's book as sort of like the Bible of how to start ie'ie weaving. That provided a lot of input. And then it wasn't until after that our kumu came into our lives and said, oh, I know how to do that. I can teach you. So, it's interesting that our teacher is not a Hawaiian either. This was introduced to us from a non-Hawaiian who just happened to be very good at it. Today, in a lot of other cultural practices like lauhala weaving, there are genealogies and people are proud of that. They learn from so and so who learned from so and so, so they have like a genealogy of sort. Whereas our genealogy just kind of goes up, 2 generations, and
For now.
for now, it's a contemporary practice, but
It's growing. I mean, now we have our students teaching classes too, so the genealogy will continue.
yeah.
And that's really what our hope was when we first started this journey, was to get more practitioners out there doing the work so it doesn't die. The knowledge will continue on.
And Haunani, how did you get involved with this practice?
Well, I actually was with him from the beginning, I saw, I witnessed him when he started, and just started dabbling with the ʻIeʻie. We were just dating at the time. And it wasn't until after we got married, we had children, until our children got bigger. So maybe like 15 years later, then I got involved and I started to work with Kumulāʻau. Our children were bigger. I had more free time, and I took on this responsibility with Kumulāʻau. And since we've been together for 15 years doing this in the community, it has flourished into something that we never thought would happen. I mean, we didn't think that we'd be doing this today. It was just something that we got involved in to just get some people in the community doing the work. But as we started to do the work, we found that it became a healing journey where it started to heal people when they come into this class and start to do the weaving with us. So it really changed our perspective on not only perpetuating our culture, but also uplifting humanity. And it's actually a bigger task, but it blesses more people. You see so much goodness come out of that from the individuals that come to our classes. And really, that's really what drives us to do it more, is to just continue doing that, because we're serving humanity, which I think is one of the best things we could do in life.
Yeah, and I just want to add that, we want to acknowledge Patrick Horimoto. Patrick Horimoto he's a non-Hawaiian, but nevertheless, he was the one that proliferated ʻIeʻie weaving in the 80s and the 90s. And it was because of him that we met our mentor and Kumu, Raymond Nakama. And if it wasn't for those two non-Hawaiians for proliferating and just reintroducing this practice, I probably would never have gotten involved with Ulana ʻIeʻie. So we just want to mahalo them and credit them. So we stand on their shoulders. And of course, that's part of the reason why we teach who we teach today, not just Hawaiians, but non-Hawaiians, because you can never tell that some of our non-Hawaiian students may have a positive impact on a Hawaiian weaver in the future and may reintroduce this to a Hawaiian family again. So we see the value in sharing this practice to all people, because we always believe that everyone has in them innately the ability to weave, because basketry is universal. It's in every culture around the world. And so therefore it's meant for us, all of us, to be able to do this kind of work.
So as our students teach, as we teach our students in the classes, and then they get their aha moments, they call it an aha moment, or when they're troubleshooting and we're not around and they have to figure it out on their own, we tell them, oh, that's your kupuna, or that's your elder coming in innately to help you to figure out things and troubleshoot. And it's beautiful to see that happening.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I'll wrap it up there. So thank you so much, Kumulāʻau and Haunani, for joining us tonight and for giving us this insight into your work. Absolutely incredible. And thank you everybody in the audience for joining us for this event today. The next online event in the series is Hawaiian Featherwork Stewardship and Conservation on the 21st of May at 5:30 to 6:30. More details about booking will now be on the website, and we look forward to welcoming you back. Until then, it is goodbye from the British Museum. Bye.
Aloha.
Aloha.